topic dear to my heart, in fact, is old school radio. And a theory that some people have that Spotify has basically killed music radio. That why on earth would you bother listening to music radio when you can have your own tunes, when you can curate your playlist and tweak it to your own tastes? Why on earth do people still listen to music radio, for example, he said, on a radio station which also includes music? Interesting question. What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, it's not just limited to music radio. It's actually Spotify and streaming itself has just completely changed music in general.
Yep.
And interestingly enough, that has subsequently changed radio as well. So a very simple starting off point for this discussion is the duration of songs.
Yep.
They've just become shorter and shorter, partly and in part because of, the information internet age and people's attention spans getting shorter and the availability of information and media. People can chop and change on a whim. So we're trying to shorten it down so that people consume more, which in a streaming world where you're paid for spins on a record, you're more likely to get that the shorter a song is. Now that impacts music radio because of the programming when songs just start to become shorter and shorter and shorter. And that obviously influences your radio station.
It does, but I mean, hey, we're a radio station. We've been doing this for 45 years. The technology has changed since then. Are people still listening to music radio? I'm going to get personal here. When you listen to music, do you go, hey, I like this radio station. It plays the sort of music I like. That's where I'm going to go. Or is it Spotify or go home for you?
For me personally, because I'll speak to that, because I'm a hugely passionate advocate of Spotify.
Yep.
And streaming music in general. But that's because, much like a lot of platforms, I was such an early adopter with Spotify especially, and Spotify Premium. I bypassed all of that Spotify ads business because I could see the value in paying for the service. And over the years, Spotify has developed and gotten so much better for me. However, I am a massive music sort of, not a nerd, but a huge fan. So I've always curated my own music and playlists and albums, and I continue to do that now, but I'm empowered by some really impressive algorithms that assist me in that.
Yeah, and in some ways, people that consume their music through things like Spotify, you've kind of just swapped the DJ for the algorithm in some ways. You still have somebody curating your music tastes and telling you, not only giving you what you like, but giving you suggestions on what you might like based on your previous choices. That's just a robot doing that for you instead of a person.
Yeah.
Really, it's same.
It's same, but different, because the personalization is where that's the differentiating factor. When you tune into radio, you're partaking as in a community generally in listening to the songs that are played, all the other messaging around the songs, the conversations that are being held in between the songs. Yep. Whereas in a streaming environment, obviously that listening experience is curated purely for you based on previous listening experience.
Exactly.
People that
if you skip one song, they're going to go, oh, maybe he doesn't like that artist. I'll put less of that in the playlist in future.
Absolutely.
Right?
And there's some really interesting, Spotify just recently has started pushing out a thing called Daylist, where it's been able to assess and analyze based on the time of day, and I'll pull it up for you as I'm talking about it, what my typical listening habits are for this moment in time, for this particular part of the day. So right now, apparently I'm typically like to listen to what they're calling indie chill bedroom pop Wednesday morning.
Wow.
And that playlist will change into the afternoon, and it'll move from that to potentially something else. It's fascinating.
It is fascinating, but does it restrict us in the same way that you and I have talked about how sometimes we can get into sort of chat group echo chambers?
Yeah.
That the algorithm just reinforces one part of who we are. It doesn't let us explore other views and opinions, doesn't let us broaden our horizons into other tastes of music. We need to work harder to bust out of the stereotypes that the algorithm puts around us, not just in what's happening in social media, but also in Spotify to an extent.
To a degree, yes. However, what I would say to that is that the exact same thing happens when you're tuning into radio, is that you're partaking in the exact same experience as everyone else is. And so it is sort of monotonized in that way. Whereas with the algorithms, the opportunities for discovery are just so much, more varied and broad and vast. And so a good example is my son and I have very, very similar listening profiles and habits. However, the fringes of his algorithm and the fringes of mine are so far apart, and they're just fascinating to explore. And so that's where we can share and say, look, you and I both love this core, he's a bit of a mirror image of myself. We both love this core fundamental genre. However, here's what I'm seeing over here. Have you seen this song? Have you, met this artist yet?
And that is, I suppose, the strengths and the weakness of this digital environment. And hey, I'm the old guy. I'm on the radio 5-6 days a week, so I'm going to advocate for that, because I think the difference between Spotify and, look, I enjoy Spotify, especially if I'm wanting some tunes that are going to reinforce a certain way that I'm feeling. If I'm working on a project or something that's in the background, it helps me to focus.
Yeah.
But I think the difference between Spotify and music radio is the difference between individual and community.
Yeah.
That, for example, last week, wonderful example of community, and perhaps this isn't music radio, but there was thousands of people around New Zealand that were hearing the same stories, that were hearing the same songs, that they were hearing the same testimonies. There was a collective thing that was happening with a group of people spread across New Zealand and the various transmitters that you're not going to get with Spotify, which is curated to individual needs.
Yeah.
It's I suppose, that dichotomy between individualism and consumerism and community and that sort of spirit of manaakitanga. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the key thing, is that this conversation around Spotify only goes as far as music.
Yeah.
Music radio, however, has all of these other beautiful elements. The fact that you are here behind the mic, this interview that we're conducting right now, just adds color and context and perspective that Spotify's not giving, especially here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm not listening to a playlist of music that might suit my mood right now, but is interspersed with messages of current affairs or hope or inspiration or education or entertainment, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Spotify, unless I move into a mode of listening where I'm going into listen to a podcast, in which case I'm just doing nothing.
Spotify is for
no
music radio, what podcasts are for talk radio to an extent.
Yeah.
But I suppose what I hope is the case, and hey, people can text through if they like, 8168 keyword Rhema, is that there is a relationship between me and the listener, which is different than the relationship between the algorithm and the listener.
Absolutely.
That there's a wairua, a spirit that happens there that you're not going to get on an algorithm.
Correct, because there is no interaction with, it is just an algorithm. It is just maths. And I mean, a really common, another parallel would be a DJ who's playing a set of songs and takes an audience on a journey, and you're able to interact. And even if they're not communicating, there's at least that level of community of people on a dance floor enjoying the music that's playing, and they're going, you're doing a great job, and then energy comes high and then low, and they're going on a musical journey. That's pretty close to Spotify, but in the streaming world, you don't have that person. You're not surrounded by similar people that you're listening alongside with. It completely lacks that community, which here in radio, absolutely, we do have.
And in other areas of AI, the algorithm is getting scarily close to replicating the DJ. But don't settle for substitutes. The real Jay Smith, not the algorithm. Thank you so much for joining me on the program. Cheers, man. Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.